Hey y'all, welcome. Good to see folks. Harmony, Jessica, Lisa, good to see y'all. All right. So folks, just so y'all know, we're going to record this. So there should be a prompt that's come up for y'all for just to make sure you're aware of that. We're also probably going to give about 2 more minutes. We had about 25 folks register. So we still are expecting a few more folks to roll on. Here, I see a couple more coming on. So we'll start in about 2 minutes. But if if you have access to the chat, go ahead and just put your name and what county you're coming from. And then if you feel so inclined, maybe one just quick thing about what you're hoping to learn tonight. All right. Jessica's in Knox County. So good to see you. Lisa from Laverne. Awesome. Okay. Well, it is 3 after, so I think we're going to go ahead and kick it off and get started. And I'll do some introductions in a moment. Welcome, Harmony and Aura. Um, welcome. My name is Austin Sauerbrei. I'm the Executive Director of Statewide Organizing for Community Empowerment. And for those of you who aren't already members or know about SOCM, we are a 52-year-old statewide organization that's focused on grassroots organizing. We have 7 chapters across the state and also hold down a number of statewide campaigns. One of the biggest campaigns that we've been working on the past 2 years that's statewide is the Public School Strong campaign, where we're working on building the power of parents and educators and community members to work together to show up and engage with their local school boards and fight for honest, equitable, and fully funded public schools across the state. But we're also engaged in different chapters around environmental issues, around issues of housing, insecurity, and other items as well. But at our roots, we're about civic engagement and building the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary change in their communities. So we'll share towards the end ways, if you're not already involved with SOCM, how to get involved. And we'll also share at the end a couple events that are coming up around getting out the vote efforts that we're participating with coalition partners. But without further ado, today is going to be about voter registration. And so we believe with SOCM that voting and electoral work is not everything, but it is a very significant part of making change in our communities. And over the years, we've done quite a bit of work around getting out the vote. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we do believe that having as many people in our communities actually go into the ballot boxes, as many people as possible, is really important. And so I want to introduce Stephen Adelson with Civic Tennessee. So we recently became part of the Civic Tennessee table, and I'll let Stephen share a little bit more about Civic, but they do incredible work to support organizations like ours to do all sort of the tech and logistics and a lot of the training work behind get out the vote efforts all across the state. So I'll let Stephen dive more into that, but he's going to be guiding us through this voter registration 101 training. And then we'll close out at the end with a good chunk of time for questions and talking about some next steps. But with that said, I'm going to toss it over to Stephen.
Thank you so much, Austin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Like Austin mentioned, my name is Stephen Adelson. I use they, he pronouns, and I am the program director at Civic Tennessee. And like Austin mentioned, we are a statewide coalition of nonprofit advocacy, grassroots, and community organizations, of which we are over 40, that are all focused on serving different communities across the state, meeting their needs and advocating for a better Tennessee for everyone. And a major aspect of the work that we do is around voter engagement, including providing our partners with the training and resources and the tools that they need to successfully conduct voter registration in the communities that they're serving. So I'm really excited to spend this time with you all at the time of this training. I know it's being recorded. We're just a little bit under a month until the voter registration deadline in Tennessee for the November 5th election. If you did not know, the deadline is October 7th. And so everyone who wants to be able to vote in the November 5th election needs to be registered to vote by October 7th. There's no exceptions to that. So that's a hard deadline, and it's the deadline looks a little bit different depending on how you register to vote, which we will also talk about in a little bit. So like Austin mentioned, we're going to spend a good amount of time at the beginning going through the voter registration rules and election laws that you need to know. As someone who's looking to conduct voter registration in your community between now and October 7th, what are the things that you need to know to make sure you are setting yourself up for success? We will also share this slide deck out afterwards. So if you want to be able to refer back to the things that you need to know, you'll absolutely be able to do so. And then the rest of our time we'll spend answering your questions. And we'll also have a little bit of a conversation about what are the places and spaces that make the most sense to do voter registration right now? And where does it not make sense to be doing it? So how can we be really effective over the next few weeks to make sure that people are ready to activate come election day? So first, we're going to start off with voter registration requirements. And in order to register to vote in the state of Tennessee, there's a few things that someone needs to keep in mind. First, you need to be a citizen of the United States. You need to be 18 years of age or older on or before the date of the next election. So in this case, you need to be at least 18 years old by November 5th. It's okay if you are 17 years old and registering right now, as long as you are 18 by the next election, which in this case, again, is November 5th. And finally, you need to be a resident of the state of Tennessee. That means you consider Tennessee your home. As long as you've lived here for one day and you consider Tennessee your home, then you are eligible to vote in the state of Tennessee. The final requirement that we need to keep in mind is that if you have been convicted of a felony in Tennessee, in another state, or by the federal courts, your eligibility to register and vote in Tennessee depends on the crime you were convicted of and the date of your conviction. It's very confusing in Tennessee. If you didn't already know, Tennessee disenfranchises the highest percentage of Black people in the country. Hundreds of thousands of people who live in the state of Tennessee are disenfranchised and have lost their right to vote. The process of getting your right to vote back, which you are not going to talk about today since it would require hours and hours and hours of our time, is also very complicated and confusing. And so there are a lot of organizations like ours and Free Hearts in particular, which I'll talk more about later, are great resources for supporting people to get their voting rights back if they've been convicted of a felony. So before registering to vote, if you have been convicted of a felony, you should carefully review the requirements to vote in Tennessee after being convicted. In many cases, like I said, you've lost your right to vote and you need to regain your eligibility before registering to vote and voting. So now we're going to talk about the registering to vote itself. There are a few different ways you can register to vote in Tennessee. First, if you have a Tennessee driver's license or you have an ID from the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, you can register to vote online, which is the way in which we highly recommend people to do if they have the correct form of ID. You could only register to vote online if you have one of those types of ID. But again, it's the safest and it's the easiest way in which to be able to register. So we always encourage that to be the first way in which people do so. Your other option is the traditional paper voter registration application. And if you fill out a paper voter registration application, there's a few different ways in which you can get it where it needs to go afterwards. The first is you can deliver it in person to your county election commission. And actually, we recommend that if you are completing a paper application that either you or someone else, if someone else is collecting a voter registration form from another person, that they deliver it in person. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that's the case later. You can also mail it to your election commission. That's totally fine. So those are your two methods. You can either deliver it in person to the election commission or mail it to them. If you need to find the mailing address for your election commission, and that's based on your county, there's a link in the slides that you'll be able to access afterwards, so you can know exactly where to mail it afterwards. Just keep in mind that the mailing address for your election commission might actually be different than the physical building. So when you go online, make sure you're confirming the mailing address for your election commission and not sending it to where the brick and mortar building might be. Where can you find paper voter registration applications? So if you decide you want to help people to register to vote and use paper, there's a few different options. One is you can find it online on the Secretary of State's website. You can print it out, make plenty of copies for yourself. You can also go to your county election commission office and request a nice stack of them to be able to use as part of your voter registration efforts. There are also a number of different offices and community spaces that are required by law to actually make voter registration forms available. So you can check out any of these places and they'll have voter registration forms available. So in order to vote in an upcoming election in Tennessee, you must register to vote at least 30 days before election day. So that means that if you register to vote online, you need to register to vote online at least 30 days before election day. So by October 7th for the November 5th election. If you decide that you're going to fill out a paper form and you're going to deliver it to your election commission in person, you're going to drive over, walk over, however you're going to get over there, you need to make sure that it's at the office at least 30 days before election day. So October 7th is your hard deadline. And then finally, if you decide that you want to mail your voter registration form, you can postmark it by October 7th. So it doesn't have to be received by the 7th if it's mailed. It just has to be stamped by the United States Postal Service by that date. And again, that's a hard deadline. So if you're waiting until October 7th, recommend that you bring it to the post office first thing in the morning. Don't wait till the afternoon because they might not go out that day. So we talked about registering to vote. And when you register to vote, you might be doing that for the first time ever. And in some cases, there are people who might need to update their voter registration for different reasons. So I want to talk about that for a little bit. There are a few different reasons why you might need to update your voter information. Let's say you lived somewhere for a long time and now you've moved. So your physical address has changed. Whether you moved from a different state, from a different county within Tennessee, or even within the same county in Tennessee, you need to update your voter information. Also, if your legal name has changed for any reason, most common reason is that people get married and their name changes, you need to update your voter information. And there might be other reasons why you need to update your voter information. Something else might be outdated for whatever reason maybe. And so you need to make sure that you take the step of filling out another voter registration form or registering to vote online again to ensure your information is up to date and you're ready to go. You can use the same exact ways to update your voter information as if you were simply registering to vote for the first time. When you fill out the voter registration online or on paper, they'll actually give you the option to let them know if you're registering because you need to change your address or maybe your name has changed. So you have the ability to indicate that as well so that your voter record gets updated right away. You can then return that paper form if you decide to do paper the same exact way. Or again, if you do it online, quick and easy, which is awesome. When it comes to updating your voter information, if you moved from a different state or from a different county in Tennessee, you need to make sure you update your information at least 30 days before election day. So the deadline is exactly the same. So if you're moved from a different state or from a different county in Tennessee, the same voter registration deadline applies to updating your information. If you moved within the same county, or if you change your name, you should still update your voter information 30 days before election day. But you do have one extra option, which is nice. So if you actually just moved within the same county, you can go to an early voting location within your county and update your address and just be able to vote the same day. But that's only if you moved within the same county. Again, if you moved from a different county or from a different state, this does not apply. This only applies within the same county if you changed your address. If you update your name, let's say your legal name changed, you can go to any election commission offices in your county and update your information until the end of early voting. I say all of this because you can do it, but again, you should make sure that you are updating this information at least 30 days before election day so you don't run into any issues. If you wait until election day to update your address within the same county, you will be required to vote with a provisional ballot or an affidavit ballot, which means you'll have to go to your new polling location or a different location in order to actually vote. And then you'll have to do even more work after election day. You don't want to have to do that. You want to make sure that when you go and vote, that it's counted right away. But the most important thing is just get your information updated 30 days before election day and you'll be good to go. To answer the question in the chat about will this be shared with you? Yes, you'll have access to these slides after today's training. So now I want to talk about first-time voters. We talked about a few different ways in which you can register to vote, and I want to emphasize why some ways might be better than others for some people. If you are registering for the first time in your county, or if you moved out of your county and now you're coming back for whatever reason may be, and you need to re-register to vote, you actually are required to vote in person for the first time in Tennessee, unless you went and registered to vote in person at your election commission. So again, if you are registering to vote for the first time where you live right now, or if you moved and then came back to the same county and need to register again, you'll have to vote in person for the first time, unless you register to vote in person at your election commission. So that means if you register to vote online, or if you register to vote by mail, you won't be able to vote via absentee ballot if you need to be able to do that for whatever reason may be. So we always recommend that if someone might need to vote by mail or vote by absentee ballot, that they register to vote at their election commission. If you want to be able to vote absentee, again, you need to register to vote in person at your election commission. So you can vote like that in your first election. For a lot of people, this doesn't necessarily apply, but it's just something it's important to keep in mind, since if you're registering folks that might be older and can't physically get to their polling place, if you're helping people with certain physical disabilities or other disabilities that might prevent them from being able to access a polling place, they might need to take advantage of voting by mail. And so registering to vote in person for the first, so they can vote that way for the first time is really important. There's a really good question in the chat as well. The question is, what about college students with a temporary address? So in Tennessee, this still applies to you. So let's say you're a college student, you live in Tennessee, but you decide you're going to go off to Michigan for school. If you want to be able to vote in your first election back in Tennessee, you have to actually travel back to Tennessee to do so, unless you register to vote in person in Tennessee. It's very unfortunate that that's the way it is. Same thing if you're a student in Tennessee, but you're going to school in a different county. So let's say you live in Memphis, but you're going to school at UT Knoxville. If you want to be able to vote back in Memphis, you need to, for your first election, you need to go back to Memphis unless you register to vote in person in Memphis first. It's very complicated, but that's the rules of the state. And so when it comes to help supporting students to navigating their first voting experience, we want to make it very clear to them and help them to understand what the requirements are. So let's say that student is at UT Knoxville right now and can't get back to Memphis to register to vote for their first election. Then the best thing that they can do is register where they're living at UT Knoxville and vote in Knoxville for their first election. And in the future, if they want to be able to vote in Memphis elections, they need to go back to Memphis and register to vote in person so that they can, and then vote in their first election from there. Does that make sense? So the quick and easy of it really is that if you want to be able to vote by mail in your first election, no matter who you are, you need to register to vote in person at your election commission office. After you have voted let's say you didn't do that, let's say you registered online or you registered by mail, as long as you vote in person the first time, then you'll be able to vote by mail in the future without any issues, as long as you're eligible to be able to do so. So before I talk about voter registration drives, I know I shared a lot of information about laws and things like that. You don't have to memorize this, but it's really important that you keep this as a reference for when you do get questions. Because if you're doing a voter registration drive or you're helping someone to register to vote and they have a question, you don't want to just guess. You want to give them facts, the truth about what they need to know. And the most important thing is if you don't know, be honest and say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can help you to try and find the answer. So before we keep going, does anyone have any questions at all about any of the laws around voter registration itself that we just went through? The questions you've asked so far have been really great. So thank you for asking those because they're really important, and everyone's situation can be a little bit different. All right, so we'll keep things going, but again, keep putting those questions in the chat, and I'll be checking in on those from time to time. So now let's talk about voter registration drives themselves. This doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about you setting up a table at an event. This might be you going door to door in your community and talking with people about voter registration. It doesn't have to be you in one particular spot or location. You could be on the move, you could be on the go, but no matter what, this information applies to you. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in one spot just conducting voter registration. So when you're hosting a voter registration drive, you want to make sure you're always providing accurate information to anyone who wants to participate in our democracy. I already mentioned this. If someone asks you a question and you're not sure of the answer, just be honest and let them know you're not sure. Your first option is to help them find the answer, so you offer to follow up with them. The other option you have is encourage them to contact their county election commission to get their question answered. So give them the phone number, the address, the information that they need to contact their election commission so that they can get the answers to the questions that they need. It's really important that you personally don't assist someone to register to vote if they are not 100% sure about their eligibility to register to vote, to register and vote. If someone isn't sure if they're eligible, even after you've explained to them what the requirements are to be able to register to vote in Tennessee, you should encourage them to contact their election commission so that they can assist them with determining their eligibility. They know the law the best, and they can really walk someone through the process if your support is not enough for them. If someone has any questions about their eligibility due to a previous felony conviction, you should refer them to a trusted community organization or an expert who can assist them with navigating their circumstances, because for everyone that has been convicted of a felony, whether it's in Tennessee or somewhere else, the process of getting your voting rights back here is very complicated. So we really need to make sure that we're leaning on those who know the law, who understand the process, and not make any assumptions about what someone needs. We highly recommend that you refer people to an organization called Free Hearts. They are a women-led, all formerly incarcerated, amazing organization in Tennessee that is staffed and ready to support people to navigate felony disenfranchisement and voting rights restoration. They'll help someone to really understand what it's going to take to get their voting rights back. In some cases, it can be pretty expensive because you have to go through the courts, and sometimes Free Hearts and other organizations are able to help to subsidize or cover some of those costs or get them waived by judges. So we always recommend that you refer people to Free Hearts to navigate that process. The reason why I'm saying all of this is because it's illegal in Tennessee to knowingly assist someone to register to vote who is not eligible. And so if someone isn't sure, the safest thing you can do for yourself, but also for them, is to refer them to the County Election Commission if they're not sure about the eligibility requirements, or if it's because they have a felony conviction, refer them to an organization like Free Hearts. When collecting paper voter registration applications, I'm going to actually take a move back for a second. When you're doing voter registration drives or you're doing voter registration in the community, we always recommend that you use online voter registration as option one. So how can you do that? You can have a QR code that links directly to the online voter registration website for Tennessee. You can provide them with a link so they can type it into their phone. You can also have it on a tablet, a laptop, at a table. We always recommend online first. And as a reminder, to do that, you need a Tennessee driver's license or an ID from the Tennessee Tennessee State Department of Homeland Security. So as long as you have that, you can do online. And so that's always option one. If someone needs to do a paper form, then you can help them to do a paper form. But there's a few things you really want to make sure you keep in mind, and there's some extra laws you need to take into consideration. So first is you really want to make sure that when you collect a paper form from someone, that you've reviewed all of the information to make sure everything that's required is filled out and provided. You also need to make sure that all of the boxes that need to be checked off are checked off. You also need to make sure that the form has been signed and dated with today's date, and today's date being the day the person filled out the form, not their birthday, the date they filled out the form. People tend to make that mistake, and that form will get rejected if it's not today's date, because you were not born today, you're not born yesterday, you were born X number of years ago. That form will get rejected. So on the screen right now, you have the voter registration form for Tennessee. I'm going to go through it just very briefly, but in box one of the form where it says voter eligibility, there's 3 questions. If someone is going to register to vote, they need to make sure that they can answer yes to all 3 questions. If someone answered no to any of those questions, they should not complete the form. So if they said no, if they said yes, that they're a US citizen, yes, they're a resident of Tennessee, and yes, they'll be at least 18 by election day, then they can fill out this form. But if they said no to any of those questions, they should not fill out this form. In the second box, this is where they provide their personal information, like last name, first name. If you have a middle name, put it. If you're a junior, senior, anything like that, make sure you put that there. Tennessee requires that you put your full social security number on the form. So making sure that someone has put all 9 digits of their social security number there. They need to make sure they put their date of birth. Race is optional. Sex is required. So they need to check off male or female. That is what the form requires. So someone has to check off one of those options, even if they don't identify as male or female. You're asked to put the date where you were born, so the city and state. You're also asked to put your phone number, including the zip code, the area code. You'll also need to put your address. So if you have an apartment number, or unit number. You need to make sure you include that in your address. You're going to want to put your city, your state, and your zip code, and the county, not country. Some people read county as country and write United States. You need to make sure you put the county where you live. It's optional to put your email address on the form. We recommend that you do, because if there are any issues with your voter registration form, the Election Commission will try and get in contact with you to resolve those issues first. So offering more contact information will be helpful. If you get mail somewhere else than where you live, you need to also make sure you provide that mailing address in addition to the address where you live. And if you remember, earlier we talked about changing your address. So if your address has changed, in box 3, there's space for you to be able to indicate what your previous address was. So if you have moved, just make sure you provide that address so again your information gets up to date. Box 4 is the one that people have the most questions about. This is the box about felony conviction. And so if you've ever been convicted of a felony, unless it's been expunged or you've been pardoned by the governor of Tennessee or whatever state where you were convicted, then you're going to have to check off yes if you've been convicted. And if that's the case, you really want to make sure you're referring that person to Free Hearts or another organization, unless they know that they've already gotten their voting rights back. If they know 100% I've gotten my voting rights back, and I can register to vote, then that's great. But in a lot of cases, it can be very confusing. If someone's been convicted of a felony and is not 100% sure that they have gotten their voting rights back, make sure you refer them to somebody who can really help them to understand their particular circumstances. And the final box is the voter declaration. So there's a statement here that you swear that all this information is correct, and then you're going to sign it and you're going to put today's date. If someone helped someone else to physically fill out the form, so let's say there was a voter who can't write for themselves for any reason, you need to make sure that you put your information at the bottom as well, so that the Election Commission knows that you are the one that helped that person to actually fill out the information. If they wrote it themselves, you don't have to put anything on the form about you. It's only if you actually took the pen and you were writing things for the person because they couldn't do it themselves. So before I go any further, just want to pause again. Does anyone have any questions about the voter registration form and the things you need to keep in mind? Okay, let's keep going. So now you've helped someone to fill out the form, which is great, but what happens next? There's some other things you need to keep in mind. First thing is, if you collected a voter registration form from someone, it needs to be submitted to the Election Commission within 15 calendar days of the date that's on the application. That's why I really emphasize that when someone's filling out a form that they're putting today's date and they're not making a mistake with that, since that's the date that the Election Commission is going to look at. So if the date is wrong, if they put their date of birth for any reason as today's date, then that form will get rejected, unfortunately. So you really need to make sure that you are delivering those forms within 15 days. We recommend that you do it right away, do it the next day. If you're doing it on a weekend, do it on the Monday following. Don't hold on to those forms for any reason, because that's that person's right to vote, and you are taking responsibility for that, and they're trusting you to make sure that that form gets returned on time. If for any reason you're doing voter registration really close to the deadline, so let's say the deadline is October 7th and you help someone to register to vote on October 5th. Question for you all, do you still have 15 days to return that form? You helped someone to register to vote 2 days before the deadline. Do you still have 15 days to return that form? No, I saw some head shakes, which is good. You don't. The deadline is the deadline. So if you helped someone to register to vote less than 15 days before the voter registration deadline, that 15 days no longer applies. You have to make sure the forms are in no matter what by the deadline. That will supersede the 15 calendar days. So hopefully that makes sense. If it's more than 15 days before the deadline, you've got time. If it's less than 15 days, the deadline is the deadline that you need to follow. The voter registration deadline is that deadline. Big law that you need to keep in mind when it comes to voter registration. You must not alter someone else's voter registration application for any reason without their knowledge and consent. As a best practice, never mess with someone's form. If you see a mistake, make sure you get in contact with them and they are the one that fixes it, or give them a new form so that they can do it for themselves. You never want to be in a situation where anyone's questioning your integrity. And so we always recommend that if there's a mistake on someone's form, you give them a new one or you ask them to make the correction. If you aren't able to return the form to that person who made a mistake, you should still submit the form with the mistake, and that's okay. It will get rejected, maybe, if the mistake is one that requires the form to be rejected, but it's better than you holding it onto that form or throwing it out. You absolutely should always make sure that forms are getting either back to the person who was registering to vote or get it to the election commission. Those are your two options. You don't do anything else with the form under any circumstances. Just a few other things to keep in mind when you're doing voter registration. One, you can't incentivize voter registration, which means you can't require someone to register to vote in order to receive something else in return. So, for example, you can have food and giveaways at your voter registration drive or at an event, but you can't require someone to register to vote in order to get that food or to get a prize or a giveaway. That is illegal in every state, not just Tennessee. If you are paying someone to collect voter registration applications, you must pay them an hourly rate or a salary. You can't pay someone based on the number of forms that they collect or by a quota or some sort of goal. That's not allowed. Again, that applies to every state in the country. So if you are paying people, you need to pay them an hourly rate or salary to do voter registration. I believe this is the last consideration. This is something new that came into effect this year, and while it might not apply to a lot of people, it's important to keep in mind. It's now illegal to allow someone convicted of certain types of felonies to collect voter registration forms from somebody else. So let's say you are an organization and you've got a team of 10 volunteers. None of your volunteers can have one of these felony convictions if they're going to be helping people to register to vote and collecting forms from them. So if you've been convicted of any felonies under election law, if you've been convicted of offenses of financial exploitation of elderly or vulnerable persons, or if you've been convicted of aggravated perjury, you are not allowed to collect voter registration forms from other people. Again, very few people in Tennessee have been convicted of these felonies, at least of those who are alive. So in this case, it's not something you have to be too concerned about, but it's something we need to be mindful of, that this is a law that does exist. So that is everything that you need to know to set yourself up for success when it comes to voter registration. So what I want to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can just see each other. And I want to make sure before we get into further conversation about, what are the best opportunities to do voter registration right now? What's my advice and what is some advice you might have for each other? I just want to ask you all if you have any other questions about anything we've talked about up until this point, about election laws, voter registration rules. Just want to make sure you're feeling good about what you're getting yourself into. It's a lot, but at the same time, it's things that you would do naturally on your own to support other people. It's just talking about it in a little bit of a different way. So any questions at all about what we've talked about so far? Okay.
I apologize if I missed this, but if you're trying to use the forms, the physical forms, how do you go about getting those? Like, do you have to go to the local county election commission? Can you download them? Like, how is that uh
Yeah, great
attainable?
question. Yeah, so it's in the slides, so you'll be able to see it again, but just to quickly let you know, you can find it online on the Secretary of State's website, and you can download and print out copies of it like that, simply. Your other option is to go to the Election Commission and you can request a stack of them. They always have them available. Maybe just don't request thousands of them, because they probably won't have thousands of them on hand at any given time. And then there are some other state offices that will have them, like public libraries, Register of Deeds, and a lot of other departments will have them too. So you've got plenty of options for getting access to forms. Any other questions at all?
Just had a quick one. I think you covered this in an earlier slide, but to recap, for checking voter registration status, you want to just recap or touch quickly on the Proud Voter platform again? Would that make sense here?
That's a great point. We did not talk about that, and that's something I'll make sure we incorporate into this presentation going forward. There are going to be people who you come across when you're doing a voter registration drive that might think that they are registered to vote, and they might be. That might be entirely true. But the one thing we want to encourage people to do is always check their status before the voter registration deadline, because if for some reason you're no longer registered because of something that the election commission might have done to check to see if you're still eligible to be able to be registered, or if maybe you've moved or you need to update your information, you should go online and check. Austin just put in the chat that we have a great website. It's called proudvoter.org. And you can go on that website and check your voter registration status right there. And if you use the link that Austin put in the chat, it'll make it even easier for you. And take 30 seconds, put in your information, and you'll be able to know if you're already ready to go for this election. And if you're not, it now is the perfect opportunity then to register to vote for the first time or update your information.
I would just add one more plug for Proud Voter. This is also an amazing, Stephen just got us hooked up with this a few weeks ago. Any election, local election, state election, national election that you're curious about, of like who's running, like when are the election dates, all that stuff. This is a one-stop shop for that information, where the polling places are. So anything related to sort of voting in your elections, this is a great, just easy resource for folks.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I'm going to also let our team know that you're really touting this, because this is great. I can see a question in the chat. Does this tie into Ballotpedia as well? So our website, Proud Voter, doesn't link up with Ballotpedia. We'll be linking up with a tool called Ballot Ready. Ballotpedia is great. For some people, it's not something that we would make available on our website, because it's not as friendly for different types of devices. But Ballot Ready is designed to be mobile friendly and provide that same type of information. So if folks have other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what are the great opportunities that you might want to consider when it comes to doing voter registration over the next few weeks. I would like to throw it out to you all first. What are your thoughts on, places, spaces, and opportunities where you're already thinking about doing voter registration between now and October 7th? I saw earlier in the chat that one of you, at least I believe it was in Knoxville, is looking at doing, I don't know if it was in Knoxville, maybe it was Laverne, doing it at a community festival that's coming up for autumn or fall, which is a great place to be able to do that. Are there other ways and places where you're thinking about doing voter registration now?
I was thinking in McMinn County, we've got this huge like fall festival, pumpkin town that like brings in people from all over. So that might be a good point. And also just want to plug too, if there's any public school strong folks on the call that are interested in planning something for your community, let me know and we can make it education issue focused. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Liv. And Aura just put in the chat that they're headed to our one of our promote the vote happy hours in Clarksville, where we've partnered with different restaurants and bars throughout some cities to make voter registration available, make it a special and fun happy hour with maybe some promotions and deals for people to stop by and just have a good time. We're not incentivizing voter registration, but we're creating a community space where people can come together and have a good time. So what you've already mentioned at this point is the perfect trend. You're talking about meeting people where they're at. You're talking about doing voter registration at a festival in the community that's already happening. We're talking about hosting events at restaurants and bars where people are coming through already to have a good time. And now we're providing them with another resource. So that's the perfect thing to do, since you're already meeting people where they're going to be. Right now, with just a few weeks before the voter registration deadline, if your plan is to create an event and try to get people to come to that event specifically to do voter registration, that might not be the best and most effective use of your resources. So we always recommend, as we get closer to the deadline, that you're finding the places in the community where people are already coming together and taking advantage of that. That's going to be always our number one recommendation. I see a question in the chat about a virtual drive. So that's a good question. When I think about a virtual drive, I'm not necessarily thinking about an event, right? Like, you're not necessarily getting people to come onto a Zoom call and then do voter registration. When I think about a virtual drive, I'm thinking about a few different avenues. One is, how are you leveraging social media to make sure people are taking 30 seconds and to go to a link and do what they need to do? Make sure that they're registered to vote, update their voter information. Do you send a newsletter out, or does the organization that you send a newsletter out to, sorry, excuse me. Do you work for an organization that sends out newsletters? Are you making sure that information is at the top? We're encouraging everyone that gets it to take 30 seconds to do this really quick and easy thing to make sure that they can vote on election day. So all of the digital ways in which we engage with each other, consider how you might be able to bring your voter registration, or just checking the simple step of checking your voter registration status into there. If you've got a social media channel, you've got your little description underneath your handle. You can put the link that Austin put in the chat. You can put that in there. Perfect opportunity passively, where people might just click that link and take action right then and there, which is awesome. So you've got a lot of different options. There's another great point in the chat. Why not send a quick text to everyone that you know and say, hey, this is really important and I've already done it. Can you take 30 seconds and do the same thing? Can you click on this link? Hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, best friend, can you take 30 seconds? I just want to make sure that you're ready to vote in this election. Easiest thing you can do, right? You can just copy and paste it to everyone in your contacts and then call it a day. If everyone did that, there's no doubt that every single person in Tennessee would hear it from at least one person, which is awesome. What that's called is relational organizing. Relational organizing is the practice of tapping into your network, the people who you know and who trust you, that if you are the one that provides them with that information, they'll take the action. If they hear from me, let's say I call up your best friend and I don't know them, I'm cold calling them, they're not gonna they're less likely to take an action because I asked them to, but you're their best friend, and if you ask them to do it, they're more likely to do it in that case. So that's the power of relational organizing. Fun fact: next Tuesday is National Voter Registration Day. So September 17th is National Voter Registration Day. And if you want to try out some relational organizing with us, we are going to be hosting a texting power hour where you can join us and help us text Tennesseans to make sure that they are ready to vote in this upcoming election. And if people respond back to us and say, hey, I'm already registered to vote, or I just checked, thanks for helping me, we're going to follow up with them and say, hey, thank you so much. We're so happy for you. Can you do the same thing for 2 or 3 other people that you know? Can you just copy and paste this message and send it to a few people in your contacts and make sure that they're doing the same thing? So I'm going to put a link into the chat where if you'd like to join us and see what it's like to contact other people, support them, to participate in our democracy, and try out a little bit of relational organizing with us, we'd love to have you. So I put that in the chat if that's something you'd like to consider. So I think we've covered just about everything that really comes to mind. We covered the voter registration rules, the election laws. We talked a little bit about what are the places and spaces where you want to be doing voter registration right now. The biggest thing, again, is meeting people where they're at. And what are the opportunities to simply but effectively leverage digital platforms for voter registration? So putting a link in your bio on social media, putting it at the top of your newsletter for your organization as a reminder for people, creating regular social posts that just allow people to take the quick step of going to one link and doing everything that they need to do in one place and not having to go to a bunch of different places to do so. So if you do that over the next few weeks, then you are really setting yourself up for success to make sure that people in your community who need your help get it, and that they're ready to vote come election day or sooner if they vote early, which they should. So I'll pause there. Is there any other questions or thoughts that folks want to share out before I hand it back over to Austin for some wrap up? Okay, I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and so that if anyone wants to be able to get in touch with me after today, has more questions, wants more resources, don't hesitate to reach out. It's Stephen with a V at CivicTN.org. But Austin, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you all so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Stephen, for doing this. This has been fantastic. And again, we've recorded this, so we'll share back out the recording and the slides. On some kind of closing notes, wanted to just share for those folks in Middle Tennessee in terms of next steps. We do have an event coming up on October 5th with our Tennessee for All Coalition partners. And I'm putting the link in the chat, and we'll also send this out in an email. But we're doing a Get Out the Vote event on October 5th in Rutherford County. We would love for y'all to join. If you're anywhere within a driving distance of Murfreesboro, come on down and join. The registration is there. If you're in East Tennessee, would encourage you to connect and plug in with our chapters. We're doing work around public education and housing justice in Knox County, and state and local elections especially, but also national elections are part of that work. So we'd encourage y'all to connect there. And finally, I think from our framework with SOCM, again, we see voter engagement as one critical part of the work, but we also see this process of getting folks registered to vote, talking to people about voting, get out to vote, as an opportunity to build relationships for the ongoing organizing work that has to happen around local issues and state issues. And so the way we think about this, every time we're talking with someone about voting, it's an opportunity to invite them to become part of SOCM. If you're a part of a different organization, invite them to become part of a different organization as well, so that you can stay in touch and we're building power for the long term, not just for election day. We're thinking about election day and after election day. So I'm going to put one more link in the chat, and I know this has been a lot of links, so we'll send these out. But if you are not already a SOCM member, I would encourage you to go to this link, and we're a membership-based organization, and our dues are $20 a year, so cheap membership. We'd love for you to be a part of our ongoing work. And I think lastly, Liv, is there anything, I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but anything that folks should know on this call about Public School Strong work?
Yeah, so when we're thinking about what's on the ballot beyond issues that matter to us for our communities, so if you want to join the movement for strong public schools, our next training is actually on Monday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. If you are already part of it, make sure that you send that registration link to 1 or 2 friends to get them to join your county. If you're not a part of it, hope to see you on Monday so you can get your t-shirt and get connected with folks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll really appreciate it. If y'all have any questions at all, feel free to get in touch. And in the next day or two, we'll be sending out all this information. So thanks so much. And thanks again, Stephen.
Thank you, everyone.